All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be dealing with Chapter 7, Section 3 here, Feudalism and Manor Life. Last week we finished with Charlemagne in Section 2, where he was the leader of the Frankish Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, and all that type of stuff. This here is now going to take what happened in Europe, most of Europe, after Charlemagne's reign ended. So what he does with his empire is he kind of separates what he left into three different kingdoms for his sons. Well, those sons were not respected by the nobility, the lords, the rich people of that kingdom. And what they're going to do is basically fight back against those three sons, and really it leads to just a lot of chaos and things like that. Now, another thing that also leads to this new type of government and economic system known as feudalism is that of those outside invaders that we talked about at the end of Section 2, the Magyars, the Muslims, the Vikings coming into attack, they're going to lead to this system also being a part of Europe. All right, so some words you need to know are right here, these 1 through 8. Knights, fiefs. Know this word here, fiefs. Vassal, feudalism, William the Conqueror, manor, serfs, and Eleanor of Aquitaine. This right here is kind of the pyramid scheme, pyramid system of this here. So you have the king at the top, you have lords. They are vassals to the king. Vassal, know that word? Vassal just means you serve someone above you. So lords will serve the king. Right here is the knights. They are vassals to the lords. So the lords are over the knights. And then down here are the peasants. They're really not vassals because they're not getting land or anything like that. Peasants, of course, are the largest part of society and what have you. And it's this feudalism system that is governed by the king. So the king owns all of the land, but really it's the lords right here that usually have more power throughout this area. Yeah, the king was seen as the ruler, but the lords, they're the ones that really handle everything throughout the kingdom. So they get their power from the king and all that type of stuff. All right, so how does this work? Knights and land. To defend the lands, nobles needed soldiers, okay? And so the knights are going to become these soldiers. At first, they were the warriors who fought on horseback, and they are the best of the soldiers. However, they need armor, they need weapons, and they need horses, which are expensive. So the lords may provide some of that stuff, but the knights have to sometimes provide their own also. But what do the knights get from the lords? The knights get land, and that is known as a fief. So pieces of land is a fief. Okay, they get the land instead of the money. Then the noble gave a knight land in this way was called a lord. So the lord kind of controls the knight. The knight will swear loyalty to the lord and will say, hey, anytime you want to go out and gain more land, or if your land's being attacked, I, the knight, will fight for you. In return for the land, the knight promises his support. Okay? The vassal will swear loyalty and support and things like that. This system of promises will then govern the relationship between all these lords and vassals, and that becomes known as feudalism. It's very confusing. There's more to it. What was the duty of the lords? So those up there at that higher level, they had to send help to their vassals. So if an enemy is attacking, let's say the knight's land or the knight's home, the lord has to send help. Had to be fair to the vassals, so be fair to those that served under him. Don't cheat them out of money. Don't cheat them out of land. Don't punish them harshly, those types of things. The vassal could stop fighting. That was one of the things why the lord had to be nice to the vassal, is that the vassal could actually stop fighting for the lord if the lord broke their promise. So that was always the threat for the lord, to be nice to the vassal. Now, to defend the lands, many lords will build what we know of as castles. This would be an earlier version of a castle. During the Middle Ages, was primarily made of wood, so it's not like those huge stone, beautiful structures that we know of from movies and things like that. Those will come later, towards the end of the feudalistic system in the Middle Ages. Primarily, most castles were kind of boring, just wood-shaped, built with wood fences and wooden homes, things like that. Now, a vassal's duties. So those that serve underneath the lord, they, of course, are going to pledge their loyalty and that they will fight for their lord in battle. They're going to give the lord money on special occasions. So the special occasion could be that the lord had a birth, the wife had a birth, let's say a baby boy or baby girl. The vassal would come bringing gifts. Let's say the lord's daughter was getting married. the vassal or the knight or those that served under them would bring gifts to the Lord, things like that. Now, if a vassal down below gained enough land, they could actually become a lord. So you could be a knight serving another lord, and then you could be a lord that has vassals underneath you. It's a very confusing process. Now, also as a knight or a vassal, I could be serving multiple lords. I could get land from several lords, and I pledge loyalty to several lords and things like that. Now, what if two of those lords start fighting with each other? Who do I end up defending? Where's my loyalty at? Well, a lot of times that might just depend on which of the lords treated me nicer. Like maybe who's going to give me more. Things like that. Very chaotic, very confusing. And it led to a lot of backstabbing, a lot of things like that that were just, it's definitely chaotic throughout this time period. And we're talking a time period of maybe a good 400 to 500 years that this is going to be going on. All right. Feudalism is going to spread throughout all of Europe. It actually spreads out of Europe and into England. And it gets into England through this guy here, William the Conqueror. So feudalism is first started by the Franks in Europe. But by, you can see here, 1066, William the Conqueror, he's a French nobleman. So he's a lord in France who has many vassals underneath him. Well, he's going to take his army and he's going to hop the English Channel and go over to England because he thinks he should be the king of England. Well, he actually becomes the king of England because there's going to be the famous Battle of Hastings that William the Conqueror and his army are going to win, and now he will claim himself as the king of England. He is going to give fiefs, or these large pieces of land, out to all these knights and vassals in England that served with him, and then William the Conqueror is going to go back to France. So he's going to be the king of England living in France. Very confusing, but it is just how it was back then. So that's how feudalism, though, spreads to England and will be a part of English society for centuries. All right, this here you do need to know about the manor system, okay? Now, first of all, the manor itself is the large home that the lord lives at. The lord lives there, or the knight may even live there, things like that. Now, the manor is really, in the manor system, is a village. So think of Springfield, and let's just say one knight of Springfield, let's say the mayor. The mayor is the Lord of Springfield. He's going to have, of course, the largest home and things like that on top of the hill overlooking the village. Okay? Now, what happens is during this feudalism time is all the peasants, which is a majority of the people in Europe, they need protection. They need protection from outside invaders, like the Vikings, the Muslims, the Magyars. But they also need protection from outside kingdoms, outside lords and things like that that want to take over their land. So what the knight or the lord of this manor will do is pledge to protect all the peasants of this area. But in return, the peasants have to live here outside the manor in the village, and they're going to work all of the land that the knight or the lord owns. Okay? So the knights allow these peasants to farm their land, to farm the knight's land. Now, in return, the peasants have to give food to the knight, to the manor up here, and things like that. All right, so peasants, we'll talk about them now. The peasants, serfs, and other workers. First of all, most of the lords are going to keep, so you take all this land over here. Okay, most of this is considered the knight's land. So they're going to keep a quarter to a third of the land for their own use. So that means anything grown on these lands automatically is the knight's property. And then the rest of the land will be split up amongst the hundreds of peasants that are living there in the manor village. Now, although the knights were not slaves, they were tied to the land, tied in a metaphorical way, as in they really couldn't leave because they had to be out in the fields every day. I mean, there was something to do every day. And usually there's a forest around the area too, so they might be cutting down wood, building buildings, but most of the time they're out in the fields, working the fields, because that was where the money was at for the knight. However, they could not leave this village without permission, just like if we had the manor system now in Springfield was the village. If you had to go to Papillion for something, you would have to get the permission from the lord or the mayor to go to that place. And that is why during this feudalism time period in Europe, very rarely would a peasant travel more than maybe 10 miles from their home. they were basically just stuck right here in this village. They didn't even know there might be another village 10 miles over the hills and things like that. They just spent most of their time right here. And in return, they got protection. That's why they were willing to do it. They were so fearful of outside invaders that they just needed the protection. And you go through this system for a generation, 20 years or so, you're basically born into it. You don't think of anything different. You think this is just how it is normally supposed to be. That's kind of how slavery was able to dominate for so long, is most slaves were born into slavery that eventually they just thought, oh, this must be how everybody lives. And that's what the peasants are going to be thinking during feudalism also. All right, so this is just an example of a manor house, how it would look today. But the manor lord, so that knight, the manor lord, whoever it was that really ran that manor, they control everything. They make the rules of everything that goes on in that village. So like the mayor makes the rules of Springfield. If you have a conflict, if peasants have conflict with each other, they go to the lord to solve that conflict. The lord will collect the taxes from the peasants. And the taxes may not be money. It's probably more grain than anything else. He had servants that certainly lived here in the manor, very large houses. But most of the time, the man of the manor, the knight, will be gone fighting off at wars. So really, women control a lot of what goes on here. And that's why women in the Middle Ages did have some power. They had very few rights, had to obey their husbands or fathers, okay? And the peasant women will work hard right along with their husbands. But some noble women really had some power. They ran the manor and things like that. And of course, you had Eleanor of Aquitaine, who's going to marry two kings, and she's going to be the mother of two kings. All right, so basically, how does the manor system then come to an end? And that's going to take, 500-600 years before it really ends. But it's going to start to whittle away. And how does it whittle away? Really, it has to deal with technology and new ideas. People start traveling away from the manor, and they come back with new ideas, a new way of doing things. But with better farming, you can grow more food. Well, if you can grow more food, you can have more people. Well, more people means we're going to have to trade for more things because we can't provide for them clothing and other materials here. So people have to leave the village, go trade with other villages. Well, eventually they start trading with other societies, going to Asia, going to Africa, and things like that. And eventually then people are going to leave the farm saying, you know what, there's something better going on in this city like Paris. I'd rather go live in Paris. I might have a better opportunity for my family. Eventually people will start, these peasants will leave the farm looking for more in the cities. And then the knights themselves, they actually start demanding money from the lords instead of fiefs, instead of land. They want money because you can't take your land with you to Africa or Saudi Arabia or Asia to buy goods. You have to have coins, money. So they're no longer wanting land from the lords. They want money. And that's going to be part of the breakdown. And then, like I said, the peasants leaving the towns, moving to the cities. And that's going to be the breakdown of the feudalistic system. But that's going to take centuries for it to break down. The Crusades will occur during that time, and that'll be part of the breakdown. The Black Plague, something we'll talk about in the next chapter, is going to lead to the breakdown. The Renaissance is going to lead to the breakdown, where people start getting new ideas, and you start realizing, you know what, I don't have to serve here at the pleasure of the knight or the lord. I can go do my own thing. And those are going to be ways that the manor system and feudalism will end. But it's going to take a long time. It's going to be very hard for it to stop. All right, so that's it for now. Make sure you guys take your quiz. I know you pause this off and on and things like that. But yeah, go ahead and do the 17.3 quiz, and we will see you later.